So safety is in that sensory diet. How do I help my kid regulate in this moment? And then the skills piece. Maybe you do have a really good relationship. Maybe your child's really regulated right now, but they're standing and they're trying to debate this limit or this rule. And you're like, no, we're not going to debate. We got things to do. Let's, get on it. And this child is just not having any of it. We have a parent of a 7-year-old, and their question is, I'm deeply concerned about my child's increasing defiance and backtalk, especially the backtalk. It's not just occasional misbehavior anymore. It's a daily struggle. It's a daily struggle. For instance, when I ask them to do anything from homework or chores, they roll their eyes, argue, sometimes just outright refuse. We've moved away from punishments and taking away privileges, but honestly, it's the only thing that seems to have a lasting effect. Although I guess it's not that lasting, because here I am asking the same question. What strategies can I use to establish clear boundaries and discipline in a way that's more effective for their age? Okay, great question, you guys. So I'm going to address a couple of things. One is, I love that this parent is asking, what strategies can I use to establish clear boundaries and discipline in a way that's more effective for their age? And that is just a really key question, because I think sometimes we give kids either not enough information or too much information, and we kind of have to see where our kid is. What are they really struggling with? Because a 7-year-old could be struggling, and all that back talk and defiance, or whatever we want to call that, which is just a code word for dysregulation, right? But whatever we want to call that, that kid is struggling somewhere. Now, is it the relationship? Is there so much disconnection, so much struggling, so much arguing going on every day, which it kind of sounds like when I ask them to anything from homework to chores, they roll their eyes, they argue, and sometimes outright refuse. That just sounds like we're kind of waking up and we're already butting heads no matter what happens. So we have to look at, if it's a situation like that, we want to look at, is it that our relationship has broken down? And so this kid is pushing back because we're not connected. We're not having that trust in each other. So my kid doesn't trust me to support them in a situation. They might brace themselves. They may feel threatened. They may back away, shutting down because it's broken down. So there's that support part. So this is the 3-pronged behavior approach that we always want to look at: support, stress, and skills. If you're new, like I said, to any of the courses or the Conscious Parenting Academy, you'll see that as you go through it. So if it doesn't make sense now, it definitely will. But we want to look at behavior from this 3-pronged approach of support, stress, and skills to figure out, one, what is the root cause? And then 2, once we know the root cause, we know how we can start to support a child appropriately for where they are developmentally. So age doesn't necessarily match up where we might think they are developmentally. It just depends on our child and their unique profile. But looking at this child, so we want to look at, is it the relationship that's broken down? Is this child, we know that a child who is struggling back talk, they're dysregulated to the point where they don't feel either heard, and they're not able to regulate. Like, there could be so many things going on. So we want to identify, what is it that my child is really needing in this moment? But when we can't do that with them being dysregulated or with us being dysregulated. So the support, stress, and skills, that stress piece is, how can we regulate in this moment? Let's just step back from whatever we're asking, whatever they're defying, and saying, we're both overwhelmed. We can't make any decisions like this. Now, with a 7-year-old and younger, really with any age, but we definitely want to implement some kind of a sensory toolbox, an area, a sign that we have, like a nonverbal signal that says, I'm overwhelmed, I need tools. And we have this pre-established routine plan, and this has to work for your family. We talk a lot about how to figure out what works for our kids inside the classes. So again, we'll cover some of that, but we need to figure out what helps our child regulate. So for example, my kid had a swing in her bedroom, It was just attached to her loft bed was this swing that now they have them where you can like buy them on Amazon. It's probably like $150. My daughter made her own with blankets. And then her dad reinforced it and made sure that it was okay. But we did not go, you can buy them, I'm sure, but she did this on her own and made this swing in her bedroom because that was super regulating for her. So she would come home, she would read books on that thing, she would hang upside down and just swing and listen to her, YouTube videos or whatever she was doing at the time. And this is when she was between the ages of 6 and 10, maybe even a little bit older. I mean, she still loves to swing, but when she had that particular bed and that was like her routine, whenever she needed to regulate, she would go in there and do that. We also had a lot of sensory games that we did with each other because she liked deep pressure. So tools can be anything from Play-Doh to if your child likes physical touch when they're overwhelmed. Some kids don't like that. Some kids need space and they need privacy and they don't want you to talk at all. So knowing what kind of a sensory diet your children will respond to regulate is also really important. So is it a support relationship, stress, I'm dysregulated? Now, sometimes it's a combination, right? And there's dysregulation at the root of it. So we always look to how can we regulate before we do any kind of shifting perspectives, behavior, any of that. We have to figure out how do we help kids feel safe? Children cannot listen to us. They cannot take our advice. They can't do any of that unless we help them feel safe. So safety is in that sensory diet. How do I help my kid regulate in this moment? And then the skills piece, maybe you do have a really good relationship. Maybe your child's really regulated right now, but they're standing and they're trying to debate this limit or this rule. And you're like, no, we're not going to debate. We got things to do. Let's, get on it. And this child is just not having any of it. Sometimes there's skills that they're working on. Maybe that skill is questioning and logic and reasoning and trying to just work out their own point of view by reflecting how they feel and back to you and then seeing what happens. So maybe engaging in that conversation without changing your limit is possible. But sometimes we get so, I don't know, tell me, I know this happens to me, so you guys can tell me if it happens to any of you. Sometimes I just become stressed in that moment. Like I don't have time to let you move through it. I just want something to get done. Or I feel like if I don't stop what's happening, then it will never stop. And that pushes us to get forceful with our kids. Sometimes our kids are working that out and we don't engage because we're afraid that means that we're going to give in, or that they're going to think that we don't mean it, or we're not going to be firm. And then that's going to set a bad example, and all of this fear thinking that goes through our heads. But actually, if we just stop and like I said, use some of those neutral words, like, well, tell me more about what you're thinking. I'm not sure I understand. Engages your child to explain themselves, to share more. And no, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to change your mind, but it makes them feel like they have a voice, and that even if things don't change, I can express it without somebody wanting to shut me down, without somebody saying that my reaction, my emotion to this limit is bad or wrong.